What's up, guys? This is Jesse from Cantilever Games, and today I wanted to continue on the Making Games in Unity tutorial series that I've been working on. I'm trying to make a quick mobile and PC game for you guys and walk you through all the different steps involved with that. And hopefully along the way I can learn some things too and take on new challenges. So this is where we left off last time I played. Basically, you got an array of items that move up and down, they rotate, and when you click on them, they'll disappear. Since last time, I've done a couple things. So you'll notice since last time, if you've been watching the videos, I changed the array size from I think it was 6x6 to just be 5x6. And I also played around with the camera position a little bit just to move the array over into this area. For this video, what I want to do is create some UI elements so that as you click these and make them disappear, it'll keep track of the score for you. And I'll also have a bar that will fill up as you gain points. I'll show you a quick clip of what the final result's going to look like from this video. So the first thing I want to focus on is creating the score box here that'll display the score. To do this, first we're going to need the image of the score box, so like the color of the foreground and the background. And I'll quickly show you how I do something like that. So this is the program I use to create images. It's called Affinity Designer, and I think it's a pretty good program. It's a lot cheaper than going with something like Photoshop, anything like that, where you have to pay yearly. This is a one-time flat fee. I think it was like 50 bucks. And then you get to keep it forever, and you can do whatever you want with the stuff that you create with it. But everything I'm going to show you right now, you could do using, you don't have to use Affinity Designer for it. You could use something like a free program like GIMP or even Microsoft Paint to create this stuff. So what I'm going to do is create a new document. The way this works is it lets you size it by pixels. And I usually do this 1024 by 1024. It's a pretty good idea to work in these sizes. You want to make sure that the pixel size isn't too small, because then sometimes when you go to like stretch it out, it'll be very pixelated. So I usually like to make sure that there's at least like 1,000 pixels when I export. This is a pretty common number, 1024, and I usually just work in multiples of this. So for instance, I know for this score box I want to make it 300 by 200. So what I'll do is just right here I'll write times 3, and then for this direction I'll say times 2, and it'll update that. So basically what this gives you is like a transparent background where you could draw vector art on top of it. So I'm going to use this rounded rectangle to draw the background of the score box. And I think I want to make that like a black color. Now I'm going to click on the rectangle, copy and paste it, and you can see it created a new one on a new layer. And in this program, if I click on that and then hold Control and Shift, it'll scale it from the center like this, so I can create that border effect. Once I'm happy with the thickness, now I can change the color to be the background color that I want to use. I think I'm going to do a color like this for right now, but we can always come back later and change the colors to match so that the whole game is uniform. So I'm going to save this file now, just so I have it. Alright, so what I want to do now is export images of these two shapes. But I don't want to just export the shape, so I don't want to export a box this size. I want to make sure that it exports the entire background. So that way I can easily just lay the background on top of the foreground, and they'll line up correctly. So to do this, first I'm going to hide the foreground, and we're just going to export the background. Go to File, Export. And I'm going to keep this at whole document. I'll say UI scorebox background. Then for the foreground, I'm going to do the same thing. Make sure that's showing. Export. So now if we go back to Unity, we should see this stuff in the project. The first thing you want to do when you put an image like this into the project is really to work with it. You want it to be set up as a sprite in UI. So I usually just change that and hit apply. Then same thing with this one. And you can see it changes so that the transparency shows up. So right now, to do anything with like UI elements, you really need a canvas in the scene, and I don't have one yet. The way I usually do this is I'll just right click and go to UI image, because I know I'm going to be creating an image anyways, and that'll bring the canvas up. Probably in a later video I'll go over some settings for the canvas, but for now you can just leave it with whatever it gives you. So right now we just have this image here. Before we do anything with that, I want to create a empty game object to work with. So I'm going to click on the image and do create empty, pull it out of the image, and then parent the image to the game object. So the first thing I want to do with this image is go to the anchor, and if you click this, it'll bring it up. I usually hold shift and click the center button here, and that'll make sure that the image stays anchored to the center. I'll also hit Alt and this button here. And what this will do is make sure that this image here is really just controlled by the parent object. This is useful because we're going to have two images, one for the background, one for the foreground, and I really don't want to go scaling both of those, so really we're just going to control everything from the parent. So I'm going to name this image background, and then I'll copy and paste it and name it foreground. So on the background image, I'll drag over the background image, and same thing for the foreground. So now you can see it pulled the image in. Right now it's actually not the right size, so if we come up here, you can see it's set to 100 by 100. But if you remember when we set it up, we did a 3:2 ratio, so I'm going to change this to be 300 by 200, see how that looks. Alright, cool. Now whenever you work with this, you want to make sure that you have the game object selected before you drag it or anything. Because if you just go and click on this, you might select something else like the background. So always just make sure you click the game object, and then you can move it around. So now that I positioned it up in the corner here, I'm going to change the anchor of the parent object from the center here to be up on the top left corner. What this does is so that when the screen changes size, this will scale from this corner, and that's really what we want. We want this to stay where it is in the corner. So now I'll hit play just so we can check out what this looks like so far. So you can kind of see how this works. The canvas that we saw is really just the outline of the screen, and the UI element just sits on top of whatever the camera is looking at. Alright, so the next thing we want inside of this is some text. So if you right click on the game object, you can go to UI and text, and that'll create some new text that we could use. And the text is set up similar to the image with the anchor and all of that. For right now I'm just going to leave it anchored to the center. If you come down a little bit, you'll see these options. Right here is where you actually write in what you want it to say, so I'll write score. Then you have normal options you usually see for any type of word processing, so I'll make sure the stuff is centered. So right here there's an option for font. The way this works in Unity is usually for any project I would create a new folder and call it fonts. And inside this you just put any fonts that you might want to use. What I mean by this is, like, on my desktop I created a folder called fonts, and in this I have like some fonts that I've downloaded. For example, one of them is called Polygon Party. You can come to a website like this, FontSpace, and search for all different kinds of fonts. The important thing to pay attention to is what the license is. Just like anything else, you need to make sure that you're using using something that's not copywritten or that you need to pay to use. And this one's freeware, and it's personal use or commercial use, so we're good to use this one. So you just hit download, and it'll give you something like this, a folder, and then you take this right here and drag it into the Unity project. So now if we come back to text, we can see under font, I'll now have another option, Polygon Party. If I click that, you can see that the font's been updated. Alright, I think I'll go with something like that. I'm just going to change the color to match the black behind it. So now we can take this text and copy and paste it, drag it down, and we could use this one for the score. For right now, I'll just write 0 in there. And maybe I'll beef that up to 80 for the score. Zoom out. When we play, you can see the text shows up too, just like you'd expect. So the next thing we want to do is, instead of just having this be static text, we want to make it so that when we click these and make them disappear, the score will actually change. Alright, so to make the score change, I'm going to come here and create a new script, call it Score Controller. I'm going to rename this game object to Scoreboard, and I'm going to attach this script to it. Alright, so we got the script open. First thing you're going to want to do whenever you're working with UI stuff like this is you're going to need to reference the UnityEngine.ui. This is going to allow us to do things like reference the text and the images and the different functions that they have. And so that's actually what we're going to do is we're going to create a public text, and I'm going to call it score text. If we save that, just come to Unity and show you real quick. So we now have this score text variable. We're going to take this text1, which is the actual number here, the 0. We're going to drag that onto the score text so that we now have that reference. So for right now, I'm just going to try and keep things pretty simple, and later on I might come back and change some of these scripts to be a little bit more elegant once we add some more stuff. For now, I'm just going to use a variable within this script to control the current score of the game. So this will be a public int. I'll call it current score. I'll set it equal to 0 at the beginning. Again, for right now, this is going to be simple, and the game's going to reset every time you push play. Later on, I might get into things like how to save the current score, how to save high scores, how to save other players. But for right now, just every time you hit play, the game's going to be resetting back to 0, just to keep things simple. Alright, so I'm going to save the script. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is have this current score variable actually change the text that we see in the box. And I'm going to do this right at the beginning and initialize it with this current value. So to do that, we're going to write score text dot text. And the reason we do this is because the score text variable that we dragged onto the script, that's really just like a text object. It's not the actual text that contains the 0. So you see here, if you click on the text object, you have another field called text, and that's what we want to modify. So here we're going to write score text dot text. We're going to set that equal to current score dot toString. And all this does is it takes our integer value and turns it into a string so that it can be used as in this text field. Alright, so let's just see if this is working. I'm going to change the initial value to be 100. Hit save. Come over here, and if we go to the script, we'll see current score is set to 0. If we change this to 100, now when we hit play, instead of 0, this should change to 100. So you can see that that's working right now. And change that back to 0. So now that we have a reference to the text and we're able to change it within the script, the next thing we want to do is make it so that when the game objects are clicked and they're made to disappear, we want to be able to send a message to this script and update the current score. I'm going to do that with a public function. So I'll write public void add score. Basically, we'll have this take in an integer. I'll call it add. And so what we'll do is say current score plus equals add. And then the last thing we want to do is update the text again with the new score. So just copy and paste that into here. So we can save this script. So now we have this function here on the score controller that'll allow us to add points to the current score and then display it in the text. So with this disappear script, this is on every gem game object. The problem is that we can't easily make a reference from each of these game objects to this score controller to tell it what the score is. For example, right now these game objects don't even exist in the scene. We know what the parent of these game objects is. It's this array parent right here. So what I want to do is use this disappear script that's on every gem game object, and on mouse down it's going to make the object disappear, and then it's also going to send a message to its parent, to this array parent, and to this create item script. And in this script I'll create another function that will then reference the scoreboard and can then talk to the score controller and tell it to add this score that we want to add. It's a little bit of a roundabout way of doing things, but it'll work for now, and then later on we'll come up with something better. So just so we can see real quick, I'm going to play this. So underneath the array parent, there's these floating item prefabs. Underneath that you'll find the floating item. And on this floating item is where the disappear script is. So each one of these is going to have its own disappear script. So within the disappear script, we don't want to just look at the parent, but we want to look at the parent of the parent, so that we get back to this array parent. So to do that in here, we're going to create some game object variables to make it a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to create a game object and call it first parent. And that's going to be set equal to the transform. So the game object that this disappear script is attached to, its transform dot parent. And then we also have to say game object. So now that we have this first parent variable, we can use it to get a component in its parent. And that component will be this script here, the create items script. To do that, I'm going to say create items. And I'm going to call this create items script. And this will be set equal to the first parent dot get component in parent. The component that we're going to get is going to be of type create items. And finally, now that we have this create items script, we can reference a function within it. And I haven't created this function yet. I'm going to call it pass score. as in like pass the score along to the next function. And when we create this, we're also going to make it require an integer. So I'm going to pass it the add variable right now. So I'm just going to copy this real quick, come over to the create item script, and create a new public function. Pass score. Again, we want to pass an integer. And I'm just going to save this real quick. You'll see that everything looks okay over here now. So just to recap, we have this score controller script with this add score function. That's what we want to access right now. And the way we did it is when you click on the item, it disappears. It's going to do this on mouse down function. This function is going to reference the create item script, which is attached to this array parent, and we're going to pass along this add integer to the score controller script. So the thing we need next really is a reference to the score controller script. So in the create item script, I'm going to write score controller, and I'll call it score control. Sorry, I also want to make this public. Let me just save real quick so you can see what I mean. If we click on array parent, we now have the score control. I want to pass it the score controller script from the scoreboard, and that's going to be our link to the scoreboard here. So now that we have the score controller linked, we can reference the add score function. So we'll say score control dot add score. We'll pass it the add variable. Now if we save and play, hopefully this should update the score when we click an item and make it disappear. Alright, so let's see. It looks like it's working. So that's good. So the final thing I wanted to add to this for this video would be kind of like a bar down here that fills up as your score goes up. That's actually pretty easy to implement now that we have reference to the score. So I'll show you guys how to create that real quick. So just like with the scoreboard here, the first thing we're going to do is create some images to use. So again, I'm going to use an Affinity Designer, create a new project, and for this one I want to keep the width the same, but double the height. So just multiply by 2. And I'm just going to do the same thing. Create a rounded rectangle for the background. This first one's going to just be black. So I'm going to copy and paste this. You can see the next one's been created. I'm going to hold Control and Shift, and then drag this to create the border. I grabbed the color from this other project here, so we can keep that the same. And what I want to do is kind of copy this and paste it again. So now we have 3 rectangles. There's the background, there's this first one, and the second one. This first one I want to make like a little bit darker. And then the top one here, I think I'm going to brighten it up a bit. So what's going to happen is with these 2 images is as your score fills up, it's going to look something like this. You'll have the empty bar and then the color on top that's filling. These rounded edges, you don't have to worry about that. It's going to fill, it'll fill with a flat line. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing we did before and export these one at a time. Alright, so now Unity should be updated with the new images. Again, the first thing we want to do with these is turn them into sprites. Alright, so now that we have that done, we can come back here to scoreboard. I think I'm actually just going to copy this whole thing. Change this to score bar. We can delete the score controller script. We're not going to need that on this. And we can also delete the text. I'm going to change the score bar dimensions from 300 to 200 to 300 by 400. And I'm also going to move it down this way. So for this one, we're going to have the background empty and full. So let's fill those in real quick. Alright, so the background and the empty, we're going to leave these as simple images, but with the full we want to change this to be a filled image. This is a really nice feature that Unity has. So basically if you move the slider you can see how the fill works. Right now it's set to radial 360. We want to change that to vertical, so then we can fill from top to bottom. And the way we do this in script is we reference this image. We reference this image here, and then we can reference the fill amount and change the value in between 0 and 1. So I'm going to do this right within the same script that the scoreboard has, this score controller script. So I'm going to use this add score function. So every time the score changes, we're going to update the text in the scoreboard, but we're also going to reference the bar and update the fill amount. To do this, first we need a reference to the bar, so I'm going to do public image fill bar. And again, the reason we can do this is because we reference the Unity Engine UI. If it's not working for you, that might be why. So now that we have a reference to the image, we can just write fillbar dot fill amount equals current score divided by max score. I forgot to define this max score value, so we'll just come and make another public integer, call it max score. So we have a 5 by 6 matrix right now, so the max score would be technically 30, I guess. So I'll just make that the max score right now. So if we just write this, it's not going to work because we're dividing an integer by an integer. We're trying to call that a float, something like 0.1, 0.2, 0.5. So really first we want to convert these to floats. You can do that like this. So we'll save, come back here. One more thing we have to do is tell it what the fill bar image is. And that was this full image here. Click play, see what it looks like. The reason I brought this up was just so that you could see it started off full because the initial value was 1. And then the second I clicked one of these, it went away. So if I go through and click all these, it should fill up completely. I'll do that real quick. And that seems to work. To fix this problem, we'll just come and set the fill amount to be 0 at the beginning. I'll just show you guys real quick. So see, this time the bar starts off at 0. And as you click these, it'll fill up. Alright, so that's all I had for this one, you guys. If this was helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe. And stay tuned for the next one. See ya.